Remember these days. Seek forgiveness. Mend your ways, and treat all to your respect. Only then will I forgive. Blessings.
As the storm subsided, the onlookers ran scattered in different directions. The news of the event spread like wildfire through the village of Ada. Those who had witnessed the transformation of Onyinye and their accomplices into ice ran to the market union to report what they had witnessed. However, upon arriving at the meeting venue, they were met with an eerie sight. The leaders of the union were also frozen, their bodies encased in ice. Other villagers rushed to the palace to inform the Igwe of the extraordinary event. But as they entered the grand hall, they were struck with horror. The Igwe too was frozen in time, his regal form now a statue of ice. The realization that both the market union and the Igwe had been subjected to the same fate as Onyinye and her accomplices sent waves of panic through the village. Villagers ran through the streets, shouting and crying out in fear. The market, once bustling with activity, fell into chaos as traders abandoned their stalls and customers fled. The air was thick with confusion and dread, as no one could comprehend the full extent of the punishment that had befallen Ada. The queen, who had been in her chambers when the event happened, was informed by a frantic servant. She rushed to the palace hall, her heart pounding with fear and confusion. As she entered, she saw her husband, the Igwe, encased in ice, his regal form frozen in time. The sight was both shocking and heartbreaking. Tears welled up in the queen's eyes as she approached the frozen figure of her husband. She reached out her fingers, trembling, but the ice was cold and unyielding. "My king," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "What has happened to you?" The chiefs, the Igwe's closest advisors, were equally stunned by the turn of events. They gathered in the palace, their faces pale with fear and disbelief. The realization that their king and the market union members had been subjected to the same fate as Onyinye and her accomplices filled them with dread. Chief Okoro, the eldest and most respected among them, spoke first. "The goddess Nmirinma has punished us for our failure to uphold justice and fairness in our market." The other chiefs nodded in agreement, their expressions grim. "We must act quickly," Chief Okoro continued. "We must send for Ezemo. He is the only one who can appease Nmirinma and tell us what to do." The other chiefs agreed, and a messenger was sent to the chief priest. When the chief priest, Ezemo, arrived at the palace, fear gripped him. But he didn't want the chiefs to know he was afraid. So he mustered courage and walked up to the king, while he made incantations and poured libations. The king watched, his eyes darting from left to right. After a while, he declared that Nmirinma had requested to be appeased. He mentioned some items including a pregnant she-goat, a he-goat, 6 large cocks, a gallon of palm wine, 6 large tubers of yam, 1 basket of eggs, 4 kegs of palm wine, and a large sum of money. When he was done, the chiefs agreed to provide the items. On the appointed day, a solemn procession made its way to the river Nmirinma. The chief priest led the way, dressed in his ceremonial robes, carrying the sacred staff of his office. The chiefs followed, each carrying one of the required items. The villagers watched in silence, their hearts filled with hope. As they approached the river, the air grew cooler, and the sound of the flowing water filled their ears. The river Nmirinma, with its clear shimmering waters, seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. The chief priest motioned for the procession to stop at the riverbank. Ezemo began the ritual by making incantations and pouring libations into the river. He called upon the spirit of Nmirinma, invoking her presence and asking for her forgiveness. The chiefs placed the items on a large mat spread out on the ground, arranging them carefully as instructed by the chief priest. The pregnant she-goat and the he-goat were tied to a nearby tree, while the cocks were placed in a woven basket. The gallon of palm wine, the tubers of yam, the basket of eggs, and the kegs of palm wine were arranged in a circle around the mat. The large sum of money was placed in a wooden bowl at the center. As the chief priest continued his incantations, the waters of a river began to ripple and glow. Ezemo continued his incantations. The atmosphere began to change. What started as a gentle breeze quickly turned into a violent wind. The waters of a river, which had been calm and shimmering, suddenly rose with a fierce intensity. The villagers watched in horror as the waves crashed on the riverbank, scattering the carefully arranged offerings. The waters receded, leaving the offerings in disarray. The villagers who had been hopeful moments before now felt a deep sense of dread. It was clear that the goddess Nmirinma was not pleased. The chief priest, drenched and shaking, tried to regain his composure, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. As the chief priest Ezemo stood by the river Nmirinma, he declared with a trembling voice, "The goddess is not pleased with her sacrifice. We must return home and come back in 7 days to appease her again." The elders and the villagers, gripped by fear, began to gather the scattered items, hoping to avoid further rot. As they walked, a sharp cry pierced the air, startling everyone. The villagers turned to see one of their own pointing in horror at the chief priest. Ezemo, who had been standing moments before, was now encased in ice, his form frozen in a posture of fear and desperation. The realization that the chief priest had been punished by the goddess sent waves of panic through the crowd. They whispered frantically to one another, their voices filled with fear and confusion. "If the chief priest has been punished, what hope do we have?" one villager cried out. The realization that Nmirinma's wrath had extended to their spiritual leader made the situation even more dire. The chief priest, who was supposed to be the mouthpiece of the gods, had been punished in the same manner as the others. This unexpected turn of events left everyone in a state of disbelief. The chiefs, though equally stunned, knew they had to maintain their composure to prevent further chaos. Chief Okoro, the eldest and most respected among them, stepped forward to address the crowd. "We must remain calm," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil. "The goddess Nmirinma has shown us that our actions and even those of our leaders have consequences. We must take this as a sign to truly change our ways." Back at the palace, the chiefs and the elders of Ada gathered to deliberate on their next course of action. With Ezemo, the chief priest, now frozen by Nmirinma's wrath, they were left without guidance. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on them, and they knew they had to find a solution quickly. After much discussion, the chiefs and elders agreed to seek the counsel of Ocheala, the chief priest of Aludo, a neighboring village known for its spiritual wisdom. They prepared gifts of palm wine, kola nuts, palm oil, a she-goat, and some money, hoping to gain his assistance. Aludo, the closest neighbor to Ada, was a village known for its spiritual wisdom and peaceful way of life. What separated the two communities was the serene river Nmirinma. The village is guided by Ocheala, the revered chief priest, who was known for his deep connection to the spiritual realm and his ability to communicate with the gods. The journey to Aludo was filled with a mix of hope and anxiety. The chiefs and elders traveled with a sense of urgency, knowing that the future of their village depended on the outcome of their visit. Upon reaching Aludo, they were greeted by Ocheala, who seemed to have been expecting them. Ocheala welcomed the chiefs and elders with a knowing smile. "I have been expecting you," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. However, when they presented their gifts, he shook his head and refused them. "I am very sorry, I cannot help you. Nmirinma has warned me not to interfere," he explained. When Ocheala informed the chiefs that he could not help them because he had been warned, the chiefs were initially taken aback. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on them, and they felt a sense of desperation. Chief Okoro, the eldest among them, stepped forward and tried to plead with Ocheala. "Please, Ocheala, Chief Okoro implored. We are in dire need of guidance. Our village is in turmoil, and we do not know how to appease the goddess. Is there nothing you can do to help us? Ochiala shook his head solemnly. I understand your plight, but I must respect the goddess's warning. My hands are tied in this matter. However, I can offer you one piece of crucial information. There is only one person that Nmirinma will listen to. If you can find this person, half of your problems will be solved. Though disappointed, the chiefs understood the importance of Ochiala's message. They thanked him for his insight and returned to Ada with a new sense of purpose, determined to find the person who could help them restore peace and harmony to the village. When the chiefs returned to Ada, they deliberated on the cryptic information Ochala had given them. They wondered among themselves who the person Nmirinma would listen to could be. 3 days had passed since their return from Aludo, and 8 days since Nmirinma unleashed her anger on Ada. The frozen figures of the Igwe, the union members, and Onyinye and her accomplices remained still, not moving, not talking, not even the sun, wind, or rain could melt the ice. By the 4th day, after their return from Aludo, a new calamity struck. The lands of Ada began to dry up. Farmers complained that their crops were wilting and their livestock were dying. The once bountiful river Nmirinma, which usually flowed forward into Ada, irrigating the land, started to flow backwards, away from the village. This unnatural phenomenon caused widespread panic. As the river receded, chaos erupted in Ada. Farmers and traders alike began to hoard their goods, fearing the worst could happen. The price of food tripled, and many villagers found themselves unable to afford basic necessities. The market, once a place of bustling activities, became a scene of desperation and conflict. The chiefs and elders, seeing the dire state of the village, knew they had to act quickly. They gathered once more in the palace to discuss the next steps. Chief Okoro, his face lined with worry, spoke first. We must find the person Nmirinma will listen to. Our village cannot survive much longer under these conditions. Chief Ebuka, who had been quietly listening, said, I believe the person we seek is someone who has shown unwavering kindness and fairness, someone who stood by Nmirinma through all the challenges. The chiefs considered Chief Ebuka's words and realized that he might be right. They decided to gather the villagers and explain the situation, hoping that someone could come forward with information about the person they seek. The villagers gathered in the central square, their faces filled with concern and curiosity. Chief Okoro addressed them, explaining the message from Ochala and the importance of finding the person who could appease Nmirinma. If anyone has any idea who this person might be, please come forward, he urged. As the villagers murmured among themselves, an elderly woman named Mama Nkechi stepped forward. I believe I know who this person is, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. It is Nkoli. She has always shown kindness and fairness, and she stood by Nmirinma through everything. The villagers nodded in agreement, realizing that Mama Nkechi was right. Meanwhile, as chaos unfolded in Ada, the foreign traders who frequented the markets were initially taken aback by the sight of the frozen figures of Onyinye and their accomplices. The eerie, unmeltable ice statue stood as a stark reminder of the goddess's wrath, which had befallen the village. The sight of people turned to ice, coupled with the strange behavior of the river Nmirinma, which had started to flow backwards, created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Many traders hesitated to continue their business in Ada, worried that they too might incur the wrath of the goddess. For a few days, the market saw a significant decrease in activities as foreign traders chose to stay away, waiting to see how the situation would unfold. The prices of goods soared as the supply dwindled, adding to the villagers' distress. Chief Okoro and 5 other chiefs made their way to Nkoli's home, their faces marked with worry and determination. They knew that Nkoli was their last hope to communicate with Nmirinma and find out how to seek forgiveness and make amends. As they approached Nkoli's house, they were greeted by her husband Ife, who welcomed them inside. The chiefs explained their dire situation to Nkoli, pleading with her to help them communicate with Nmirinma. Nkoli, you have always been a beacon of fairness and kindness in our village, Chief Okoro said earnestly. We need your help to understand what the goddess wants from us. Please, speak to her on our behalf. Nkoli, her heart heavy with the weight of their request, shook her head. I understand your plight, but I fear incurring Mirima's wrath. She has already shown her anger, and I do not want to make things worse. But you were the closest person to her when she lived among us, Chief Okoro said desperately. Yes, I was, replied Nkoli in frustration. I knew her and could relate to her when she was in human form. But now, as the goddess, I'm afraid I could use a wrong word, make a wrong sentence, and she will turn me into ice. I am very sorry, Ndichie. I can't help you. I don't think I have what it takes to relate with an angry goddess. Seeing Nkoli's reluctance, the chiefs turned to Ife, hoping he could persuade his wife. Ife, you know how much we need Nkoli's help, Chief Okoro implored. Please, convince her to speak to Nmirinma. She is our only hope. Ife, understanding the gravity of the situation, promised to speak with his wife. After the chiefs left, Ife said to his wife, Nkoli, my love, I know you are afraid, but our village is suffering. The crops are dying, the river is receding, and our people are in despair. You have always stood for what is right. Please, help us find a way to make amends. It had been 14 days since Nmirinma unleashed her wrath on Ada, and the village was in a state of utter despair. Nkoli had still not agreed to speak to the goddess on their behalf, and the situation had grown dire. Food and water were scarce. The market had long stopped trading, and the few villagers who had provisions refused to share or sell. Stealing became rampant, and the village descended into chaos. 3 men caught stealing were brutally killed by the families they had tried to rob, and 2 family members were killed by the men who came to rob them. The chiefs tried to restore order, but the people of Ada refused to cooperate. It had become a matter of survival of the fittest, and the village was on the brink of collapse. By the 15th day, the youths of Ada convened a meeting. Desperation had driven them to take drastic actions. They refused to reason with the elders regarding Nkoli's decision and decided to take matters into their own hands. They decided to threaten Nkoli, to force her to communicate with the goddess on their behalf. Armed and determined, they marched to Nkoli's house. Nkoli's husband Ife tried to protect his family, but he was brutally beaten and tied up. The youths forcefully dragged Nkoli away from her home, ignoring her pleas and cries. As they made their way through the village, the sky darkened and a violent wind began to blow. Suddenly, the wind became even more violent, and dark clouds covered the entire atmosphere of Ada. Lightning and thunder followed, creating a scene of chaos and fear. The darkness was so thick that people couldn't see and bumped into each other as they tried to seek refuge. After what seemed like an eternity, the storm began to calm. The darkness receded just enough for people to find their way again. As the villagers emerged from their hiding places, they saw a sight that filled them with awe and fear. Nkoli, still shaking from the ordeal, realized that the youths who had been dragging her had been punished. They lay on the ground, dead. The villagers, seeing this, understood once again that Nmirinma was displeased. Nkoli found her way back home, her heart heavy with the village's plight. She knelt beside Ife, who was still recovering from the brutal beating he had endured. I am so sorry for what you had to go through, she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow and guilt. She gently nursed his wounds, her hands trembling with emotion. Ife, despite his pain, looked at Nkoli with understanding and compassion. I understand how you feel about approaching the goddess, but things are getting really bad very quickly. Ada needs your help, Nkoli. Please, do what you have to do before it's too late. Nkoli took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Ife's words. She knew he was right. The village was on the brink of collapse, and only she could communicate with Nmirinma to seek a solution. I will do it, she said, her voice steady with resolve. I will speak to Nmirinma and find out what we must do to make amends. The next morning, Nkoli, accompanied by Ife and the chiefs, made her way to the river Nmirinma. The villagers, hearing of her brave decision, gathered along the path to offer their support and prayers. As they reached the riverbank, Nkoli stepped forward, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She knelt by the river and called out to Nmirinma. Goddess Nmirinma, I come before you with a humble heart. Our village seeks your forgiveness and guidance. Please, tell us what we must do to make amends. The waters of the river began to shimmer, and Nmirinma's form emerged, radiant and majestic. She looked at Nkoli with a mix of pride and compassion. Nkoli, you have shown true commitment to the values I hold dear. Because of you, I will give Ada another chance. Nmirinma spoke, her voice resonating with divine authority. The people of Ada must prove their commitment to fairness, kindness, and justice through their actions. They must work together to rebuild their market and their community. Only then will I lift my curse. Nkoli bowed deeply. Thank you, goddess. We will do as you have commanded. The chiefs and elders of Ada held a crucial meeting, and Nkoli's presence was requested. As she entered the council chamber, the elders turned to her for advice. Nkoli, with a calm and resolute demeanor, suggested that the people of Ada must begin with acts of forgiveness and kindness. We must heal our hearts before we can heal our land, she said. The chiefs gathered the community together and conveyed Nkoli's message. They begged for the villagers' cooperation to restore their land. The people, desperate for change, agreed to work together. Over the coming days, villagers sought forgiveness from those they had wronged. Families who had food agreed to share, and those who needed other items exchanged them for what they had. This process of seeking forgiveness and showing kindness continued until the people of Ada realized it was a better and more peaceful way of life. By the 8th day, a miraculous change occurred. The river Nmirinma began to flow back into Ada, irrigating the land once more. The villagers were overjoyed and filled with hope. They started to plant again, and their crops thrived. The market, which had been dormant, resumed its bustling activities. The chiefs and elders gathered once again with Nkoli in attendance. They discussed the heavy fines that had been placed on foreign traders and the homage they were required to pay to the king. Recognizing the need for fairness and equality, they decided to abolish these burdensome practices. Foreign traders were no longer required to pay homage, and the fines were lifted. The village had undergone a remarkable transformation. The land was flourishing. The people were happier and more peaceful. The dark clouds that hovered over the village for the past days had receded, and the sun began to shine again. Foreign traders felt welcomed and at home. The market buzzed with activity, and the spirit of cooperation and fairness was palpable. On the morning of the 22nd day, a heavy downpour began. The villagers, seeing the rain as a sign of cleansing and renewal, welcomed it with open hearts. They believed that the rain was washing away the remnants of their past mistakes and bringing new life to their land. As the rain poured, the ice melted. By the time the rain ceased, the Igwe, the chief priest, the union members, Onyinye and her accomplices were set free. They slowly regained their senses. The experience of being frozen, unable to move or speak, had left a profound impact on them. They looked around, disoriented, but relieved to be alive. The ordeal had given them ample time to reflect on their actions and the consequences that had befallen the village. The Igwe, once proud and authoritative, felt a deep sense of humility. The union members who had enforced unfair practices realized the harm they had caused. Onyinye and her accomplices, who had been driven by greed and deceit, felt a heavy burden of guilt. The villagers were amazed and overjoyed. They gathered round the newly freed individuals, embracing them and celebrating their return. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the sounds of jubilation. The chiefs and elders, along with Nkoli, led the celebrations, grateful for the goddess Nmirima's mercy and the village's newfound harmony. The experience had changed the people. They understood the importance of fairness, kindness, and justice, values that Nkoli had championed. They realized that their actions had not only brought suffering upon themselves, but also upon the entire village. The lesson was clear. True leadership and community spirit required integrity and compassion. When the Igwe and others learned it was Nkoli who had interceded on their behalf, their hearts were filled with gratitude and respect. They approached her, their heads bowed in humility. The Igwe spoke first, his voice filled with sincerity. Nkoli, we owe you our lives. Your courage and kindness have saved us and our village. We are deeply sorry for all our actions and the pain we caused. The union members and Onyinye echoed his sentiments. We have learned our lesson, Nkoli. We promise to uphold the values of fairness and justice from now on. Thank you for giving us a second chance. With the village of Ada transformed and harmony restored, the time came to elect new leaders for the market union. The villagers, recognizing the importance of fairness and integrity, gathered to choose those who would guide them into this new era. Nkoli, whose courage and wisdom had been instrumental in saving the village, was unanimously elected as the new president of the market union. Her leadership and commitment to justice had earned her the respect and admiration of all. As she stood before the villagers, accepting her new role, she felt a deep sense of responsibility and pride. The inauguration ceremony was a joyous occasion. The market square was decorated with vibrant colors, and the air was filled with music and laughter. The villagers came together to celebrate, not just Nkoli's election, but the unity and cooperation that had brought them to this moment. Nkoli addressed the crowd, her voice filled with gratitude and determination. People of Ada, today marks the beginning of a new chapter. We have learned the importance of fairness, kindness, and justice. As your president, I promise to uphold these values and ensure that our market remains a place where everyone is treated with respect and equality. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give us a like and let me know what you took away from the story. Let me know the lessons you learned from the story. Don't forget to share with anyone you know would be interested and subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.